Hello everybody, it's Merlin here, and we are continuing on with the Gintama story arc reviews / reactions. The most recent one that I watched was the Infant Strife story arc, which was only 2 episodes, but the actual 2 episodes were completely on the story arc and didn't diverge into something else, which for something this short for this show is pretty rare. Now, the plot of this one is basically Gintoki is leaving the Odd Job Center, and he notices a baby right outside, and the baby happens to look exactly like him, and there's a note that says, "This is your child, please take care of it." Now, apparently Gintoki has, intertwined with some ladies in the past, but it's kind of funny. His initial reaction to it was probably one of the best things about these episodes, because he just walks by it. He's like, nah, this has to be a joke, this isn't happening, this can't be real. Walks by, thinks about it when the baby yells, goes back again, looks at it, it's like, no, this really can't be happening. And then he walks away again, the baby cries again, and he's like, I said this can't be happening. That was a pretty funny little gag. And apparently, that's kind of the joke, is that everybody's really falling in love with this little baby who has the same expression and as well as the same type of hair as Gintoki, so everybody automatically assumes it's his and kind of gives him a hard time about it, and he's just like, well, this can't be mine, but everybody seems to like it, and he's like, he can't stand the fact that everybody's just falling in love with this baby, as babies, often kind of create that effect around people. So the comedy was primarily based around that, and there was also some other stuff with the side characters just kind of doing other little odd jobs that happened to intertwine with the main plot, but most of the comedy in this one wasn't really that strong, so I think this one's probably the least funny in terms of the comedy that I've seen thus far. The more serious aspect of the story arc was a little bit different. I don't want to reveal too much, but it's pretty much the kind of story that we've seen before. Certainly, this child was abandoned. It's obviously not Gintoki's. I think you could probably figure that out pretty quickly. It turns out that there was this young woman who was actually the servant or worker of this high-powered CEO, this wealthy businessman, and fell in love with his son, had the child shortly after the son had died, basically pursuing the son to use him as the heir for his family, but it turns out he's kind of a bad guy, hence why the young lady wanted to give him to Gintoki, just kind of to save him. And most of the rest of it is just kind of figuring out, how to deal with the bad guys, the henchmen, the hired goons that the rich guy sends after the kid, and whether or not Gintoki should give him back to the grandfather or not. And there's some fighting as well. The backstory with the young lady and learning about her relationship with the wealthy man's son was actually some of the best writing in the episode. There was some good drama, and there was a little bit of commentary about classism and sexism, I'm guessing, in Japanese society. It wasn't touched on in too much depth because it was, only 2 episodes. But there were some subtle things I kind of appreciated, and there was some pretty intense drama. But unfortunately, it's kind of one of those instances where I really wish that this could have been a more fleshed out, more serious storyline, because I think if it was, it would have been much stronger. Ironically, I think the comedy really kind of kept it down, which I've noticed has happened before with some of the other arcs so far, but there was a better balance before. This one either didn't take itself seriously at all, or took itself extremely seriously. Like literally, there's one moment where the characters are running away, they almost die, and the young lady is basically telling Shinpachi her backstory, and one of their companions pees himself, and literally you have one conversation going on that's kind of serious next to another conversation that's supposed to be funny, and I'm like, I don't know whether to laugh or not. So I didn't think that was appropriately used particularly well. Now, the coolest thing in regards to the action in this episode is that for the first time, I think that Gintoki found somebody that could have potentially been a good rival of his. He comes across this one hitman who works for the wealthy businessman, who is this blind samurai guy who has these really acute senses and can potentially defeat him with one swipe. And there was this really cool little sequence where they make you think that Gintoki has gotten his arm sliced off, but it's actually from the perception of the blind man. Now, this isn't really a spoiler because obviously Gintama has many more episodes and he obviously still has his arm. So you know something's up, but they did actually manage to fool me, and I'm thinking, okay, with the alien technology, he's obviously getting like a cyborg arm, or he's going to get it regrown or something. But the way they actually did it was actually kind of convincing, and it got pretty gory, it got pretty violent there for a little bit. But unfortunately, like everything else, it was kind of limited. So consistently speaking, I mean, thus far, Umibozu is still the best arc because it actually had enough episodes to flesh the story out. And there was a good amount of comedy that could develop and a lot of opportunities for good jokes, but also some really good backstory, character development, and some action and drama as well. I think the coolest thing about Gintoki here was that we actually saw that he does kind of care. Like, we get to learn a couple little fun traits. Like, apparently he understands baby language because he can directly talk to the baby and understand him. And I think that's actually kind of cool because, once again, we have Gintoki kind of portrayed as often kind of a goofball and extremely nonchalant, aloof, like the slacker guy. But he really does have a strong sense of honor. And when the baby basically goes gaga and says he wants to be with his mom, he's like, you're not fit to be a grandfather. And in good conscience, I can't let the baby be in your hands. So there was some good stuff there, and I like the fact that he kind of sort of bonded with the baby and said, maybe when you come back when you're older, we can hang out. And he said this cool little speech about how life is, 80% hardship, and you're going to go through a lot of it, but, laugh, cry, grow up, and live, and then come meet me when you're a man. And he's like, it's okay, though, because, there are some good things that make it worth it. Like for instance, after a long day like today, sake never tastes any better. And, there's this cool final scene where he looks out at the cherry blossoms and he's like, spring is almost over. Kind of like implying, youth is almost over. And, it's kind of a little smaller, subtle moment with a little bit of power that I really like. And I just kind of wish Gintama had more of that, and I'm hoping it really does because, it feels to me like it's very hit or miss so far. Like, sometimes the comedy is really great and sometimes there's some good drama kind of thrown in there. Other times the comedy's a little weak or it doesn't really relate to the main story. So, I don't know, I feel like they just kind of throw anything at the table and see what happens. But overall, Infant Strife was decent. I mean, it was okay. I thought there were some good things in it, but on the whole, I didn't think it was particularly memorable. Like the storyline with the grandfather and, his character arc, his growth, and the forgiveness is something we've seen before. It's kind of a little predictable. The action wasn't quite as good as it could have been, but it was okay. It was too short. It was too short and there wasn't enough time. But I think we got to learn some interesting things about Gintoki in this episode, and that's the best thing about this arc so far. So overall, Infant Strife was okay, but I'm sure there'll be some more interesting ones along the way. Alright guys, I'll talk to you next time when we continue on with the Gintama story arc reviews. Merlin out, stay magical.